A lot of people don't have what it takes to change. And I don't mean that in a way to be demeaning. I mean that our brains are built base our brains are built based upon what we repeat. And the further along I get in business and the more established, seasoned entrepreneur moms that I work with, the more that I realize that the problems that we're experiencing, whether it's a business problem or a personal problem, are not just problems in that central area. They are a problem that is an effect of something that is underlying. And the more that I learn through my own personal journey and what we are navigating with changing the brain, the more I have realized that for years, I've been helping to practice habit change to create a better result, and recognizing that many times we don't change because we're not built to change. And unless we recognize that we're not built to change, we stay the same. And so, as this applies to your business, the problem that we're experiencing is much of what I've talked about consistently, which is the wavering feeling. It is the feeling of wanting something and not being able to have it. It is the feeling of wanting a different result and maybe seeing temporary change, but always ending up in the same place time and time again. And so, what I want to talk about today is what I have experienced in my own life and what my clients have seen in their lives, and what it takes to actually create long-term, long-lasting change. And in a society and a culture that thrives on instant gratification and short-term fixes and band-aid approaches, it's difficult for us to swallow our pride and step out of our egos and really think about us being the problem and us being contributors to the problems that we're experiencing. So recently, I was talking to one of my clients, and we started diving into what she was experiencing and what was happening that kept putting her back in the same place. And the same place for her is filling herself and her schedule past capacity, resulting in her putting herself, her basic human needs, her wants, her desires on the back burner. This results in a lot of resentment. This results in disconnection in her relationship. It results in a lot of guilt as a mother. And we started to really pull back and evaluate this cycle and what the contributing factors to this cycle are. And a lot of times as businesswomen, our big problem is that we're so afraid to step off the gas or move back into an observational place that we lose sight of the bigger picture. We lose sight of how we feel. We lose our identity. And there is so much fear of operating differently or changing the way that we lead or changing things in our business because there is so much uncertainty around it. And so in diving into this cycle that was happening for her, we started to pull out the different pieces. And so the first piece, of course, is the personal responsibility, the acceptance piece, the ownership piece of it is me that's making the choices that are getting me here. And to be honest, I think that we all know that awareness creates change, but really awareness doesn't create change. Awareness creates awareness that there needs to be change. But long-term change is built by consistency and repetition, because that is how our brains work. If you're not familiar with neuroplasticity, It is fascinating, and you're going to be definitely hearing more about it here, because as somebody who I cannot be surface level. I don't know how to do it. I know it sounds so silly, but this is even why I avoid things like traditional marketing or traditional networking events, because like the fact of going up and showing up in a room and exchanging a business card feels so cringy to me. I would rather just sit down and have like a deep conversation about what is really happening behind the scenes. But I digress. Back to my point in diving into this cycle. So there's the piece of ownership and responsibility. And that's where awareness is created. And awareness is our prompt. Awareness is our trigger. Awareness is the knowing of, I don't like the way that I'm operating right now. I don't like the way that my business is making me feel. I don't like working this much. I don't like being this exhausted. I have a lot of anxiety. All of these things. This is just the knowing. This is the conscious awareness. But then the next part of the other pieces of this cycle are the lack of repetition, right? So when we are building change, when we are creating change, there is repetition that's required. So if you've ever read anything about forming habits, you know this already, that you have to do something. I think it's something like 21 days. The science could be different at this point, and I'm sure it's based on what the habit you're trying to build is. But essentially, the habit has to become part of your identity. So in the book Atomic Habits, which is a fantastic book if you haven't read it, he talks about how you can't separate things from yourself if you want to be consistent with them. So even in the way that we're wording things, right? So instead of like, I like to run, it's I'm a runner. And once you've adapted that, the change that happens is when it becomes part of your identity, when there's the I am, it prompts you to be different. It is part, since it is part of who you are, it becomes almost part of your value system. It is something that you uphold. It holds you to a higher standard, because I am a runner. So as a runner, I run, versus I like to run. That feels more casual. That feels like there's no real accountability around that. So there is, in the things that contribute to the cycle of staying the same or returning to the same place, there is first the awareness piece, which comes with ownership and accountability. Then there is the habit piece and being willing to repeat things and be consistent with things. And then the third part of this is the willingness to be uncomfortable. So I spoke about on a previous episode, difference in like red flag discomfort and discomfort that you need to lean into. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I would head back and listen to that and then come back to this one, because that is important knowledge just for you to have. And I don't want to repeat all of it here for those of you that listen every week. But essentially, the reason why we step back is because we feel the fear, we feel the discomfort that we need to lean into, and then we retract. And so this is why we see the cycle. So essentially it looks like this. I don't like how many hours I'm working, and I can see that that's causing a shift in me being able to be present for my family, and I can see that that's causing my health to decline because I don't have enough time for myself. Awareness. Habit change. In order to create a more happy life, I need to have a more healthy life. And so I'm going to change my schedule. I'm going to set more boundaries. I'm going to elevate the standards. I'm going to change the expectations in my business. That is going to free up some space that will then allow me to move my body and spend more time with my family. Okay? And so in order to instill that habit, then there is the adaptation of that habit to our identity. And in order to do that, we need consistency and we need repetition. And These are simple concepts, but we like to overcomplicate things because then we can count ourselves out. Then it can be too hard. When in all reality, it's just us not believing that we can because there is so much uncertainty around it. And so we have this awareness. We recognize habit change is necessary. And to get that habit change, there is consistency and repetition. And then we have the identity piece. And we have becoming, right? We have the leaning into discomfort that is uncertain on who we will become. And so these are like the three contributors of if in different areas where people are falling off. And these are the three different areas that we have to address and be aware of in order to get long lasting change. So in this instance with my client, she's already past the awareness and the accountability part. She has been aware that she is contributing to the cycle. She's been aware even how she does it, saying yes to too much. She's been aware of why, right? She's afraid that, the business will fail. She's afraid that all of her clients will leave her, all these stories that we tell ourselves. And so she's past that point. So then we had to move into, okay, the fear is coming from a place of uncertainty, right? And so how do we build certainty? Because that's what we're seeking. We're seeking certainty. We're seeking stability. How do we build certainty? We build certainty with habits and creating a sense of certainty and creating what feels like maybe even a false sense of control or controlling the things that we can control. And so this really came down to what is one area that we can address for you where you can build consistency with repetition to show yourself that it's safe to trust yourself. And so what this came down to was it actually came back to working out. If you've been around here long enough, you know that I make a ton of fitness references. My entrepreneurship journey began in fitness. I am an avid fitness lover. I still move my body every single day. I think it is the reason and one of the biggest keys to my happiness and my sustainability of my success. And so in this conversation, we basically came up with the idea of what if we focus on this single area for you to build this habit and for you to build this habit with consistency and with repetition so you can rebuild trust and the relationship with yourself. And so this allowed her to kind of step into and start to lean into some discomfort because I asked her the question, I'm like, what is an area of your life where you lean into some discomfort where you have felt the reward on the other side? And she instantly was like, oh, when I do, a tough workout. And I'm like, okay, let's use that because there's something in your brain already that knows that that is an area to where there is a reward on the other side. Right now, in the changes in your business, you don't have certainty that there is a reward on the other side. And because you've broken so many promises to yourself, you don't know that you can trust yourself to make these changes and still reap the benefits of your success. And so really it's about rebuilding that relationship with yourself. And so this tiny step into leaning into discomfort in another area will have a ripple effect into the long-term change. And so this is important for you to think about because oftentimes we try to take on so much and make so many changes that level of discomfort that we need to lean into to get the change can be too much, which will send us into fight or flight and then send us instantly back. So these three areas, you need to identify where are you in this change, in this creation of change. Have you taken accountability? Are you in the awareness stage? Are you in the habit building stage? Are you in the leaning into discomfort stage? Where are you? And if you can identify where you are, you'll be able to then evaluate, okay, if I know that I don't like the way things are and I want change for my life for the better. And what I keep resisting is any sort of repetition or consistency or structure. Then that to me tells me that I'm getting locked, or I'm wavering when it comes to habit change. Right. And so then you can evaluate, what is the one area where I can build certainty with myself and rebuild the trust with myself by creating some sort of accountability and repetition and consistency, because it's all about the ripple effect of what this change can create. Right. And a great example of this is one of the most pivotal moments in my career actually came from the birth of Brooklyn, who is my middle daughter. And she was my first home birth. So Emerson, who's my youngest, I had at home. Brooklyn, who's my middle, I had at home, and Cameron was born in the hospital. I did unfortunately not have a good experience in the hospital. I switched to a midwife at 28 weeks. This is a story for another day, but Brooklyn's birth was a pivotal moment for me, obviously because I met my first little girl, but really her birth was as much for me, if not more for me, than for her. And that is because in that process of having her at home and seeing what I was capable of and what my body could do if I trusted my body, showed me and proved to my brain that there were other areas that I was holding myself back in. And that sparked so much change that rippled into me starting to speak more, me writing a book, me coaching, higher level clients that, I thought that were, way out of my league, if you will. And it was all from that instance. And so we don't want to ever devalue the importance of a small change in something that is related to our confidence, our relationship with ourselves, the building of trust, or any sort of thing that makes us feel powerful. And I want you to think about, what are these things for you? What are the things when you think about the change that you want? We know that the change you want is on the other side of fear. We know that we have to embrace those fears, but there is an in-between here where we're getting stuck and we're getting lost. And that's what we're talking about today. And I hope that in listening to this, you've been able to identify where in this process of change that you are, so you can see why you keep ending up back where you were. So it is most important for us to pick a single place to be consistent, for us to repeat, and for us to create habits, because when we're talking about long-term change, we're talking about neuroplasticity. We're talking about building new neural pathways in your brain. And this is when it comes to our behaviors and our actions and our emotions, our brain controls everything. And so a lot of times when we're trying to make change, the reason why we end up back where we were is we're not doing the deeper level work that's necessary. And that's why I say the further that I get into entrepreneurship, the more I realize, in working with all of these very ambitious and high-powered women who have created great success, the more I realize that these business problems that we're experiencing are a result of our unwillingness to change, or our resistance to change, or our fear of change. And so addressing that in different ways actually gets us the result that we want. So that is what I have for you today. I hope that by listening today, you've been able to identify the different pieces of the cycle and what's necessary to break this cycle, and identify where you are in this process so that you can also create long-term change. The beautiful thing about this process is it applies to every single area, right? And making sure that we are continuing to develop ourselves and grow our, not just our expertise, but our knowledge of self, and rebuild our relationships with ourselves. That's where we're going to find the most fulfilling type of success, which that's what we're actively seeking. So thank you for listening. I hope this is helpful for you. Please send me any comments, questions that you have, and I look forward to talking to you guys next week. If you find yourself in a place where you are making all the money and you recognize that I make the money, I have the things, but I'm exhausted and I don't want to keep running my business like this, and I know I need to change, I know I need some level of accountability, I want you to reach out to me, because I have an upcoming opportunity that is going to be focused on building you into the woman you need to be a better leader, to run your business more efficiently, to help your team and build your team culture, to lead your home from a place of fullness. And we're diving into these deeper level topics and addressing things that you may have been avoided. And we're doing it in a way that I have not seen has been done before. And so if you are a woman who is running a successful service-based business, you are a mom, and you are truly desiring freedom and flexibility, and you know that what's keeping you trapped is your mind, and what your mind is making you do and how it's making you show up in your day-to-day, this is going to be absolutely for you. So thank you for listening. Again, please feel free to share with your friends if you are listening to this episode. Let me know any comments or questions that you have, and I will talk to you guys next week.